The grade 1 Cotillion, a mile and a 16th. For 3-year-old fillies, you had a field of 8 in here, but really this race boiled down to Monomoy Girl. This was an instance where she is the leading light as far as 3-year-old filly divisional honors is concerned, just based on the overall body of work, what she's accomplished this year. Grade 1 Ashland, Grade 1 Kentucky Oaks, Grade 1 Acorn, Grade 1 Coaching Club American Oaks. This really is one of the better 3-year-old campaigns we've seen from a filly in recent memory. But you had other legitimate contenders and legitimate threats, alternatives, if you will, if you didn't love Monomoy Girl and you weren't enamored with her at the 1-2 odds that she went off at. Most notably Midnight Bisou, as well as Wonder Godot. And you also had Separation of Power stretching out. Ultimately, we got an exciting race and we got a controversial finish. First things first, let's take a look at the stretch run of this year's Cotillion.
To open up. Midnight Bisou, the only one in with a chance now on the inside of Separation of Powers, has dropped back to third. It's Monomoy Girl, last furlongs on the inside. Here comes Midnight Bisou. Monomoy Girl drifting in just a bit. Midnight Bisou will have to switch to the outside. Midnight Bisou is coming on. Monomoy Girl digs in. Midnight Bisou on the outside, a late surge. Monomoy Girl, Midnight Bisou, Monomoy Girl. Break out the crown and let the coronation begin. Monomoy Girl is simply...
Monomoy Girl finishes first, is placed second via disqualification. Midnight Bisou is placed first, and she is the winner. She gets the job done at odds of 4-1. Monomoy Girl finishes second via disqualification at odds of 1-2, and Wonder Godot rounds out the trifecta at odds of 6-1 for Mark Cassidy and John Velasquez. Let's take a look a little bit more at the winner as far as connections are concerned. Midnight Bisou, she is 5 of 10 lifetime, 10 times in the money. She has never been off the board from 10 lifetime starts, $1.3 million in career earnings. Owned by Bloom Racing Stable, Madaket Stables LLC, and Allen Racing LLC. Trained by Steve Asmussen, bred by Woodford Thoroughbreds in Kentucky. Ridden to victory by Mike Smith, and you can see the pedigree at the bottom of the horse card. She's by Midnight Loot out of a Repent mare named Diva Delight. Let's get down to the figures, the nuts and bolts, before we dive into the actual disqualification. Monomoy Girl and Midnight Bisou both earn 101 Buyer Speed figures. Again, Buyer Speed figures are based on final time, Timeform US. They incorporate pace and also a few other different little things here and there. But ultimately, when you factor in the pace, Monomoy Girl earned a 122 Timeform US rating, and Midnight Bisou earned a 120. Then you have a pretty significant drop in both figures back to the third and fourth place finishers. Wonder Godot, an 84 Buyer. Separation of Powers, an 84 Buyer. From a Timeform standpoint, Wonder Godot, a 109, and Separation of Powers, a 111. When you look and see how fast the girls came home, Monomoy Girl comes home in 32.83. Midnight Bisou comes home in 32.36. Let's discuss the disqualification. I tweeted about it on Saturday immediately after it happened. I don't agree with the call, but it's not an outrageous call whatsoever. And I don't think anybody can sit there and you know, stomp their feet and say, this is an outrage, this is ridiculous, da-da-da-da. At the end of the day, Monomoy Girl drifted in front of Midnight Bisou. Now, I don't think it ever... First things first, let's just go over. She drifted in, and then she drifted out. Considerably drifting out, about 6-7 paths. Midnight Bisou coming from the back of the pack, down on the inside. Once the path was taken, Mike Smith chose to get her out to the outside, and she was floated out. The ultimate margin of victory, or the difference, ended up being a neck. Could you argue that the neck could have been made up had they run in a straight line? Certainly you could. No one knows for sure, but it's certainly an argument that can be made. And as far as the reason that I said, and a lot of people came back and were like, how can you say that? How can you look at it like that? I don't think Midnight Bisou ever lost her momentum. And there was never any contact. So that's why I said I didn't agree with it. But there have been far more egregious things that have been left up, and there have been more insignificant things that have been taken down. I don't think there's any sort of real, and I said it is what it is, and there was some person on Twitter came back and they're like, oh, that's the, you know, the sort of tagline for all of horse racing. Well, I don't know, what do you want me to say? I mean, if you watch the NFL, and I'm sure there's going to be some Yahoo that sits there and they're like, well, the NFL, da-da-da. If you watch any football, there are going to be judgment calls all the time, pass interference. Sometimes you look at it and guess what, when you slow it down, yeah, okay, maybe it wasn't pass interference, or it wasn't as bad as you had thought it was and the flag was thrown. In an instance like this, we have the luxury, and I understand, look, people like to bash stewards. I don't envy a steward's position whatsoever. They are in the ultimate thankless position where people are never going to be happy. There's always going to be somebody complaining about whatever the call is. Not everyone is always going to sit there and be like, 100% right call. There's always going to be people that complain. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of people wagering on this stuff. And if you got taken down and you were on Monomoy Girl, and good look, I had a lot of things into Monomoy Girl. All right. It is what it is. It's the name of the game. Sometimes you get taken down, sometimes you don't. I've been taken down with far more insignificant things and that certainly has ticked me off in the past. But as far as this was concerned, I wasn't surprised. I don't think she should have been taken down, but I'm not stunned. And I don't think it was like an egregious move from the stewards to disqualify her. You can certainly make the case that all of that drifting around, that if they had run in a straight line, especially with the way, again, when you look at how fast they came home, where Midnight Bisou comes home fifths of a second faster, we're talking legitimately quicker, which equates to lengths. You can certainly make the case that if they stayed in a straight line, Midnight Bisou goes by and gets the job done. We'll never know, but I just don't think it is nearly as just blown out of proportion as people want to make it out to be. Let's talk about the actual efforts from the horses themselves, disqualification aside. I thought Florent Geroux gave Monomoy Girl a great ride, considering she wasn't the sharpest out of the gate. Going down the backside, she's down on the inside. There were a number of people that have said that the inside is not where you want it to be. I'm going to leave that up to you as the handicapper, because most of you know my MO as far as track biases are concerned needs to be an absolute disaster or just very, very pronounced for me to sit there and say, you know what, I'm going to make a note of that. That's up to you as the handicapper if you think the inside was good or bad. Most people are leaning toward it being bad. She was stuck down there, and going into the far turn, Flo made a very decisive move, and I thought it was probably going to be the winning move, where you don't want to wait too long and have any of those other horses that are down in and around there start to pack it in. Don't leave any sort of question about it. You're on arguably the best horse. Let's go. Take the race to everyone else. Make them come and catch you. I thought that was the perfect move. And as far as handling her down the lane with all the drifting, it's not like he was contributing to it as far as going in one direction and she kept going the other. He was trying to straighten her out, and she just got a little bit drifty. That has to be a little bit of a concern, considering this is her first start in a little while, and now we're going to lead into the Breeders' Cup Distaff, and you're still probably looking at a short price on her. You know, if she makes the front, is she going to get a little bit drifty? Who knows? Talent-wise, I think she is every bit as good as any of the other 3-year-olds, if not better. And she still deserves 3-year-old filly champion, in my opinion. Unless something crazy happens in the distaff. And I shouldn't say crazy. Unless something like Midnight Bisou winning the distaff, and then all of a sudden, things get a little bit gray. We had that a number of years ago with Princess of Silmar and Beholder. Another story for another day. As far as Midnight Bisou is concerned, thought this was a very nice effort, considering she was coming from a little bit off the pace. She made up that ground, and she was out in the clear, well off the rail. Now, again, that goes back to you as a handicapper. You need to make the call. If you thought outside was good, then for the majority of this run, she was on the best part of the racing surf as opposed to Monomoy Girl. I like the way that she finished, and she showed that this mile and a 16th is very good for her. I'm still not totally convinced that a mile and an eighth is her bread and butter. I think she is better going slightly shorter. Of the two, I think Monomoy Girl would have a better chance in a race like the Distaff than Midnight Bisou would. I would still love to see Midnight Bisou turn back. I know that's not going to happen. For a race like the Filly and Mare Sprint, I think she would fit that thing to a T. I know it's not going to happen. Some folks have talked about the speed figures, how these are very clearly the fastest that these girls have run so far. It's that time of year, though, and that's why I don't look at a giant jump up from a figure standpoint. It wasn't giant. Monomoy Girl had run a couple of 98s in her most recent start. She paired those up, and now she moves up to a 101. I think this is probably where they live, in that low 100 range, high 90 sort of, 98, 99 spot. Is that going to be good enough to beat Abel Tasman and good enough to possibly beat Elate if she gets to the distaff? Who knows? We'll find out. We still have a few more weeks. There are going to be some more horses that show up between now and the first Saturday in November for the Breeders' Cup. I just think there's a real scenario where, you know what, Monomoy Girl, I think she's better suited at a mile and an eighth against better horses than Midnight Bisou is, even having seen Midnight Bisou run as well as she did here on Saturday. The top two both ran very well. Everyone else a little bit suspect, a little bit lackluster. Wonder Godot, she was out in the clear throughout. She finished willingly, but she was no match for the top two. I think this is where she stacks up as far as talent is concerned against them. Mark Cassie has said it's a possibility that she runs in the distaff, but they're going to let her kind of tell them if they choose to go that route. She's going to go to Churchill Downs, and obviously the top two, Midnight Bisou and Monomoy Girl, they're both being pointed to the distaff. Separation of powers, to me, is one of the other interesting ones that maybe you would want to make note of going forward. I'd love to see Chad turn her back for the Filly and Mare Sprint because, again, that division, a little bit topsy-turvy. I understand the top two are basically the Baffert horses' Dream Tree as well as Marley's Freedom, but I think separation of powers, this is that time of year. going back to what I was speaking of with the speed figures, these girls are going to make that big jump forward. 3-year-olds, they're getting older. They're starting to totally fill out and totally mature. Not totally. Obviously, we've talked about it in the past that you go into the 4-year-old and ultimately early 5-year-old. But for what we are considering at this point, 3-year-olds, they continue to improve and they continue to mature. This is when I think you do get that next little bump forward, and we'll talk about that more with the boys in the Pennsylvania Derby. But ultimately, the rest of the field, I don't have a heck of a lot to say. Monomoy Girl and Midnight Bisou, they are both very, very talented. I think they're probably the 2 best 3-year-olds that we have as far as the fillies are concerned. I think Monomoy Girl is still better than Midnight Bisou regardless of this outcome, but I don't find it just absolutely, crazy that this was the call that was made. I don't think she should have been disqualified, but I don't think it was a bad call either. I can understand it entirely considering she drifted around as badly as she did. Midnight Bisou is placed first. She wins the Grade 1 Cotillion at Parx with a 101 buyer and a 120 time form US rating. Monomoy Girl disqualified from first, placed second with a 101 buyer and a 122 time form US rating. Sounds like the top 2. They could have another rematch on their hands coming up in a few weeks at the Breeders' Cup Distaff. But the difference this time around, they'd be facing a number of other salty older girls.